All right, time now for the weekly roundup, joined by WBTV's Nick Oxner and Caroline Hicks. Guys, thanks for being here. The big story this week, the school shooting at Butler High School. One student killed, Bobby McKeithen. Another student charged with first-degree murder, Jatwan Cuffey. He's behind bars right now. Caroline, I want to start with you on this because I know you were out there soon after this actually happened. What was the atmosphere like early Monday morning over at Butler?
Well, as you can imagine, it was very emotional. There were a lot of unanswered questions, so a lot of parents very confused, wanting to know, A, where their children were, B, if they were okay. As you can imagine, some scary text messages coming in to these parents from these kids, ranging from, there's someone shooting in the school, Mom, I love you. Really just the most horrible text messages that you could think of getting. And these parents were concerned because they felt like they weren't getting answers from CMS as to where their children were and when they were going to be able to see them.
You mentioned the text messages. It seems like in this day and age, every kid that's high school age has a cell phone.
Right.
And they were telling parents almost as soon as it happened that this is going on, and then the parents start to freak out, right?
Right. So all of a sudden, we're kind of congregated by this restaurant on Matthews Mint Hill Road. And all of a sudden, we see just these crowds of parents walking towards us. And then the parents that were around us joined forces with them. And it was just this big crowd going down the street. So we grab our camera and we start following them. And some of them are running. They are basically deciding that they are going to take it upon themselves to get their children. So they are surging towards the school, passing police officers. At that point, Matthews police weren't trying to stop them because they were outnumbered, and just kind of forced their way through the courtyard, the front of the school, right past the crime scene, and then ultimately started banging on the doors, trying to get their kids out of the school, because at that point, those kids were still being kept inside of Butler.
A very hectic situation, and I know a CMS teacher actually told me this week that they tried to keep it organized. They tried to follow protocol as best they could over at Butler, and they actually moved the students to their second period class after the lockdown had been lifted because they didn't want kids just running out off school property. Unfortunately, I think that did happen to some extent. Nick, from an administrative standpoint, what will CMS as a district now do looking back at this situation?
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to look back and they're going to assess what went right, what went wrong. I think everyone trains for incidents similar to this. You know, we know schools are doing active shooter drills, stuff like that. But it's different when reality actually happens, right? And I think the thing where the area where they have the most room to improve maybe could be the communications piece and how and what they communicated to parents. I think you've already seen CMS administration kind of acknowledge, hey, maybe we could do some things better. Right. But they're trying to learn and move forward, and I think that's the message they have.
Going back to the initial incident, one teenager charged with shooting another teenager inside of a school. Yeah. You spoke to an attorney about how this could be interesting once it goes to court.
Yeah, that's right. And specifically, Jatwan Cuffey is charged with first-degree murder. It's the highest kind of murder charge. There's a capital offense. Behind bars, denied bail. And I talked to defense attorney Brad Smith this week, who said the case against Jatwan Cuffey is not cut and dry because if you look at the video and if you read at least his side of the story that he gave to Matthews Police, he was defending himself. Based on the video that surfaced on Instagram this week, it looks like Bobby McKeithen, was the aggressor initially, and Jatwan Cuffey pulled out a gun and shot himself to defend himself. Brad Smith, the lawyer, tells me, hey, you have a right to defend yourself in this country. It's complicated by the fact that he had a gun on school grounds, which is a felony in and of itself, and he fired a gun on school grounds, which was a separate felony as well. That being said, you still have that self-defense element.
A terrible story, but it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Caroline, you've been out at the school all week long. How has the community responded to this?
Well, it's been really incredible. Yesterday was the first day that the students went back to school after the shooting, and they were greeted from the moment that they pulled up. There were crowds of alumni, a pastor, some parents holding signs. We've seen a lot of those images of the Butler Strong, and that was on a lot of those signs, just trying to welcome them back in. And a lot of them said, how brave these kids are to just a few days after this tragic situation unfolded, they're back walking those exact hallways. So I think it's important that they show their support at a time like this because these kids are scared. And even yesterday in a press conference, Dr. Wilcox said they have a right to be scared and they have a right to have questions. And that's where the teachers come in now, and they are prepared to be answering these questions and helping them through this.
Caroline Hicks, Nick Oxner, guys, thanks for joining us here to talk about a tough topic. You can learn more about this on WBTV.com.